Good afternoon. It is September 30th, 4:38 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. This is the Unfiltered Conservative Podcast. Those of you that may know me, may not know me, etc., this episode is going to be picking up where I left off, okay? And I left off 4 years ago. My last podcast episode was January 5th, 2021. So the goal of this podcast is to pick up where I left off and explain what has occurred from that time on to now. And then we're going to get right into our state of affairs, our current events, etc. What I'm mainly going to talk about is what has transpired in the last 4 years, the overall synopsis, me personally, what I used to do, etc., followed by the Charlie Kirk situation, and just an overall synopsis of Donald Trump's presidency so far. So, January 5th, 2021 was my last podcast episode. I used to do these every single day, except I did it on audio. Now I'm going to video. And about 4 years ago or so, I used to be on social media called Unfiltered Conservative. I made a bunch of videos. I had a podcast show. I used to go to all those rallies on Long Island, all the flag waving events, the Trump rallies, the car caravans, etc. And that's how half of my, I guess you could say, half of how I was social media popular, whatever it's called. That's how I gained traction. But the other half of it was making videos and them going viral on TikTok. One particular video that I made about how they're going to steal the election in 2020 probably reached about 3 million plus views. And then overnight, I got about 35,000 to 40,000 followers. And I say overnight, I'm talking about a 1 week span. Okay. And then it kind of all went from that point on. Started doing an audio podcast only every single day. And I'm going to go back to that today. And I'm going to get right into it. So January 5th was the last podcast that I did 4 years ago. And the podcast episode was about January 6th. Overall, it was what to expect, what's going to happen, what may happen, and overall to be peaceful at this protest. The next day is January 6th, 2021. Doesn't really need an introduction. But I did attend that protest, okay? And I was peaceful. I was on the Capitol steps. Police told me that I could go there. I'm not going to go into every single detail. I'm just going to do it as brief as I can to save time. I'm usually going to do about 35, 40-minute videos, okay? So I go to the Capitol. Everything was peaceful. I saw no violence. I wasn't violent. The people I was with were not violent. On the Capitol steps, I did see one particular individual take a picture of me. I didn't really recognize him, but I had a feeling he was a reporter. And it was about at that moment, I saw him and he walked off with another reporter that just walked out of the Capitol building and they were leaving. At that moment, when I saw the reporter inside the Capitol building walk out, I knew instantly that something was set up here. And I had some words with these two reporters and, nothing violent, just, verbiage and, F you for being in the building. This is a setup. And then they walked away. And then the next day, all of the everybody started talking about it at work. So backtrack a little bit here. I was a Long Island Railroad conductor. I got hired on in 2018, and that's when all the social media videos started. So during this time, the left, if you want to call it the left, they knew where I worked and what I was doing and who I worked for, all the things. And let's fast forward from January 6th. We go into like the January 7th through the 19th, and that's when a lot of the stuff on Twitter at the time, which is now X, really started to escalate with my name on it, that I was at the Capitol, and I saw people around me getting arrested. Some people I knew were getting arrested, and I knew the common ground they all had was, we went inside the building. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm safe. I didn't go inside, but that's still not a reason to arrest anybody, but that's a whole different topic. So here comes January 20th. The day of Biden's inauguration. I take a train into work, and at this time, I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but I know something is going to happen. I take the train into work. The first train that I take, the first train I'm supposed to work, I get a manager that's right at the door. His name is Mike Bendick. He says, Steve, come with us. So I go into this room. I have a work cell phone, and I had to surrender that. And he's telling me how I'm under an investigation and you have to come in and report back tomorrow here at Jamaica headquarters. That's where the railroad's headquarters are, in Jamaica, Queens. So I do that, and I comply with his request, and I gracefully leave. And obviously, when I go home on the 20th, something's going to happen to your boy. And I was okay with it, because I knew that what I was doing, I was taking a chance, I was taking a risk, but they were for the right reasons, and I was doing the right thing. Did I make mistakes along the way? I did, but overall, everything was legal. So the next day is January 21st, 2021, and I go into the office, and I walk in, I go right into questions. There's an audio recorder, there's a bunch of people I don't know, and I'm all of a sudden taking questions that are policy related from the Long Island Railroad. I was like, what the heck is this, or whatever. So fast forward about a couple hours later, after we do some policy related questions only that had nothing to do with January 6th, I get told that I get a paid investigation and I am suspended for 10 days and it is paid pending an investigation. And I tell the union at the time, I was like, well, what's the investigation? They just did it. So I'm like, you know what? 10 days paid, no problem. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not really scared of anything. And I go to leave. And as soon as I go to leave, that's when Mike Bendick approaches me with an article from the New York Daily News. And it says, Long Island Railroad conductor suspended without pay, pending investigation with his capital role. Something along those lines, not really exact. So he shows me this article. I said, okay, what's that? He goes, okay, why don't you go into this room? We'll be right with you. Mike Bendick then makes a phone call. We found out who that phone call was, and I'll explain. He makes a phone call, he comes back, and there's a gentleman named Ben Gallup. He's another transportation manager, and he comes in and says, you are suspended without pay until you have a hearing. I was like, wow. I was like, all right, so you guys will be hearing from my lawyers on this one. And that was more so like at the time, it was a comment that I made because it was obviously very disorganized on their end. I don't think any of them had a clue what to do or what was going on. They were all just being told what to say and do. So I take the train home on January 21st, and then all these news articles are starting to come out. New York Post, Daily News, everywhere in New York based. It's a New York based related incident that this occurred. Now I start to get phone calls from family members and friends, and it's pretty crazy. And there was one coworker that called me and said, hey, I got to talk to you about something. I'm like, I really don't need to hear it. And she was like, no, I actually know somebody who is a producer at News 12. Now, those of you that don't know who News 12 is, News 12 is a news organization based on Long Island that is bigger than both Fox News and CNN put together on Long Island. It gains more traction. People pay attention to News 12 because it is News 12 Long Island. It's Long Island-based news. So this particular news channel, when it comes to Long Island, everybody will watch it. Fox News, CNN, yeah, they all watch it, but not to that capacity. So this individual, who is a former coworker of mine, she says, you're going to be the opening segment on the live show tonight. That was January 21st at 8 p.m. I said, okay, sounds good. Hang up the phone, call my pops. I let my pops know what's going on. I go to my pop's house, 8 o'clock, I tell him what's going on. Boom, the whole news organization is there. They have the whole headline of me. They have the opening live segment. They said they had pictures of me inside the Capitol, but they can't verify it's me, so they would not be releasing them, which is totally false, by the way. They have no pictures because I never went inside. So this news article comes out, and then I am then suspended, okay? And I was supposed to have a hearing in February. That got delayed. I was supposed to have a hearing in March. That got delayed. And it got delayed about one or two more times. And then in March, I basically demanded what's called a hearing, but in railroad terms, it's called a trial. And I finally got my hearing on April 20th. So from January 21st to April 20th, I was suspended without pay. And I did in February get a job offer back from them. They said, if you take a 60-day unpaid suspension, it's a final written warning on your record, which means that they could write me up for anything. I could have my job back. I instantly denied that ridiculous offer that they gave me. So I get the hearing on April 20th. I ended up being terminated 3 weeks later, officially terminated 3 weeks later. Right before the hearing, I filed what's called a notice of claim. A notice of claim in the court process is basically, I am going to sue you, but I have to do this process first. So after I get officially fired and I get a letter, I do one deposition. Now, again, those of you that don't know what a deposition is a out of court hearing where you're still under oath and they ask you a bunch of questions. And my lawyer said that I should expect this deposition to be about an hour and a half, 2 hours max. I believe, if I recall, this was a 4 to 5 hour deposition. They went through all my social media videos. They talked about January 6th. The attorney that was for the railroad at the time, he used to be an assistant to the attorney general, so he has a criminal background. And I remember I was in the deposition, and I believe I was doing very well. My lawyer said I was doing very well. And we took a break. We take a break, 10 or 15 minutes later, we come back, and all of a sudden, the heat is up by like 10 degrees. It's like 80 degrees in that room. And he instantly talks about January 6th for about an hour. I didn't incriminate myself because there was nothing to do there. Then the deposition eventually ends 4 or 5 hours later. I get out, the lawyer's like, wow, that was pretty crazy. That was pretty long. Anyway, fast forward to October 19th, we officially file a lawsuit against the Long Island Railroad. Wrongful termination, defamation, malice defamation, First Amendment violations, 14th Amendment violations is what we did. So in the court process, it is called a motion to dismiss. That's where the defense can come forward and say, hey, everybody's kind of sue happy. This is a reason why this lawsuit is not legit, okay? So after we go through the paperwork, we go through everything, the judge comes back sometime in August, like early August, and says that we have to refile. I think it was called an amendment. So basically what this judge said was, hey, you guys have a case here, but you need to organize it better. Give me a timeline of events. So me and my attorney get on the phone. We do a very strict timeline of events. We file our amendment. And after we filed our amendment, about a couple weeks later, the judge makes a ruling denying the motion to dismiss on all counts, and all parties must proceed to a deposition. Depositions is how I had to do the one deposition. Now we get to file the names that we want to do on a deposition, and they all have to go under questioning, okay? And after doing some investigations and doing about 10 or 12 of them, we did 10 or 12 depositions on their side. Talking about Long Island Railroad lawyers. I don't remember their exact job title, but they were basically the lawyers of the railroad. And the interesting part about these depositions, and this is where the tide really changed, in these depositions process, we got a bunch of emails sent to us. And these emails were all internal from the railroad discussing what to do with me. Should we fire him? How do we go about this? The current president of the railroad, his name is Robert Free, he had one email and he was like, is this even legit? It was something along those lines. And throughout my suspension for those 3 months, the railroad had no idea what to do. They were trying to work with the Metropolitan Transit Authority police, asking if they reached out to the FBI, and then their response was they have nothing. There is no evidence that Steve committed any crimes. So they really delayed my hearing at the time to see if I would fold or see if I would, want to settle and be done with, but that wasn't going to happen. So now we get on to depositions. And overall, the depositions were an absolute grand slam by my attorney. My attorney's name is Edward Palczyk. Edward Palczyk is the attorney for President Donald J. Trump on the CBS case where Trump sued CBS and won $25 million or something along those lines. So Edward was very passionate about doing these depositions, and I just give him a ton of credit because he literally got the opposition to admit that this was politically driven, ladies and gentlemen, politically driven. Total violation of your First Amendment right, wrongful termination, we all have it on paper. So after we go through the process of depositions comes a summary judgment. A summary judgment process is very simple. After depositions, the defense or the plaintiff, but in this case it was the defense, files a summary judgment. Summary judgment is basically, we don't think this case needs to go to trial. We think the judge can make the final decision right here, okay? Then we file, what our proof was, And that was, all the summary judgment paperwork finished in June of 2024. It is now September 2025, and we are still awaiting a decision from the judge for summary judgment. The decision is very simple. If the judge sides with the defense, the case is over. If the judge sides with the plaintiff, the case officially goes to trial, and that would be in the Southern District of New York. So I am still fighting this case for that wrongful termination. That's pretty much an overall synopsis of my case and what happened 4 years ago, what happened at the railroad, and what happened to this day. There's obviously a bunch of details I'm leaving out, those that I forgot, those that are personal. It doesn't really matter. That's the overall case here. So this is one of the last times I'm probably going to talk about it until there's an update. I'm not going to go into depth with anything. I am going to wait till we get a trial date. Once we get a trial date, I'll give an update. From this point onto the podcast, it is going to be strictly about our couple of things: state of affairs, president, current events, foreign policy. And then I also like to talk about some other like culture events. I like to talk about dating and women and men. Men are weak, women are crazy, like all that stuff. I'll be mixing in that stuff in this podcast a lot. I have a very good personality. I'm very funny. So I will definitely be cracking up some jokes here. But for the most part, it's going to be informative. It's going to be fun. It's going to be funny. So now that part is over, we're going to talk about our current events. And the current events are very simple. First thing that is going on in this world is this whole Charlie Kirk situation. Okay? My personal opinion of Charlie Kirk prior to him being assassinated and even post-assassination, not on a personal level, but him as this Republican shill, was always negative. And let's just talk about Charlie Kirk for a second here. Charlie Kirk had a lot of influence over a lot of people, and his main thing was college kids and Gen Z. And he absolutely moved the needle to get young Gen Z college kids, mostly men, mostly white men, to be more conservative. Okay? So Charlie Kirk starts Turning Point USA and gets a lot of money from a lot of donors. A lot of money. Israel. And now, what happened was the GOP wants to use Charlie Kirk to get their message and to get as many Republicans elected as possible. So he did a bunch of tours on college campuses. Okay? Very devastating what happened with Charlie Kirk. Obviously, the average American can say that. Yes, you have your leftists that, they're like, I'm so glad he's dead. I mean, these are how these people are. These people are evil. These people want you dead. They want anybody who leans right dead, okay? That's the reality of it. These people don't like you. They don't like your families. They want nothing to do with you. That's why I don't take it personal, because I already know this. But some people are like in complete disbelief. Oh my God, I can't believe people would say this about Charlie Kirk. Well, I can tell you that right now. I know I can. These people are not, they are totally evil, totally satanic. Their soul is to the devil. These are average people, right? They just don't have a soul. So the assassination of Charlie Kirk was obviously very brutal. And I think that's why there was like not just sympathy, but people were humbled, people were scared because you saw it with your own two eyes, right? We're going to get into the face value story they tell us momentarily. But listen, I'm not here to discuss how it happened just yet. I'm just saying what we saw and how he was killed instantly and the blood pouring out of his neck to literally a good old boy. That's what Charlie Kirk was. He was a good old boy. He had a family. We'll get into that. His wife. We'll get into that too. And he had kids, and he was just this 31-year-old, nice looking, groomed, average guy. And they killed him and murdered him for you to see. That's how ruthless the enemy is. They want to see death. Now, let's get into what I believe occurred, okay? And this is strictly opinion. There's no facts. This is my opinion. I'm allowed to say it. Let's just cut right into it. I believe that Israel had influence over this death. And I say that because of cause and effect. Charlie Kirk was pro-Israel, taking money from Israel, That's on record. And about a month or so before his death, sometime mid-August, Charlie Kirk started to question what Israel is doing and what they have to offer. Charlie Kirk did it to Ben Shapiro. Why can't I just question them? Charlie Kirk started to gain a conscience. He really started to preach the Lord, preach Jesus Christ of Nazareth, which I do too. Not preach, and I preach in my own way. And you see this event that happened in the Hamptons, where Charlie Kirk invited Bill Ackman, a bunch of other conservative influencers. And that's when the questions really started to roll with me. Charlie Kirk called for that meeting. I understand that. But Charlie Kirk was this pro-Israel candidate, and I think he wanted to get everybody equal, get everybody on the same team. I think he came from a good place with that meeting, but I don't think he understood how much the enemy hates him until that meeting was over. After the conclusion of the meeting, a bunch of rumors started to spread that Charlie Kirk is afraid specifically of Israel is going to kill him. Okay, that was August 13th, 2025, tweeted by Harrison Smith. Okay, Harrison Smith tweeted that. And I didn't take that lightly. I mean, I don't think anybody would, but Charlie Kirk also wasn't talking about these death threats and how that occurred. And a lot of pressure started to happen. So how does it, in August 13th, Charlie Kirk is afraid that Israel's going to kill him, and a month later he dies? I mean, that's the only evidence we have that that's who orchestrated the murder. The person who physically pulled the trigger, they tell us it was this 21-year-old who lived with a tranny and had this text message back and forth. None of that is believable, right? Even though it's a Trump FBI, do you really believe the FBI? Have they done anything to gain your credibility? No, they have not. They never will. Even with this current FBI, with Kash Patel, he's still not that good. I don't think he's a bad person, but I don't think he's going to go all the way and try and get answers. But they tell us, here's a 20-year-old that shot him. And then they arrested somebody in the stands, in the audience, I should say. He took blame. Then they did the investigation, it wasn't him. Then they arrested somebody else, and then it wasn't him. Then they arrested somebody else, and it wasn't him. Okay? You're telling me this 20-year-old college kid who lives with a tranny, even if that's true, I don't even know if any of it is true or not. It's all speculation. It's all opinion. Do we really think that a 20-year-old kid or 22-year-old kid is smart enough to go to be exactly where Charlie Kirk was, 200 yards away, direct shot, and he's trained on being a sniper, and then they try to alleviate the story by saying his parents are conservative? Guys, my point of all this, these people do not deserve our credibility. The government doesn't deserve our credibility. The FBI doesn't deserve our credibility, whether it's James Comey or Kash Patel. None of them deserve your credibility. They've lied about everything. They lied about January 6th. The report just came out. 274 FBI officials were in the crowd on January 6th. January 6th was a complete setup. 100%. I think everybody in the world now knows that, which leads that the election was stolen in 2020, which leads to that the FBI has no credibility no matter who runs it. Okay? So, I believe that Israel had some sort of influence. Something was there that Charlie Kirk was fearing for his life. Those are his own words. And he died a month later. And on top of that, I don't believe the story they tell us about this guy who assassinated him. It does not make sense to me. So that leads to me saying, hey, I believe that Israel had influence on it. I don't have proof. I don't know. But this is the only cause and effect story that makes sense. And if you could prove it to me otherwise, that'll be great. Where's the interviews? Where's Charlie Kirk's parents? Where's the murderer's parents? I mean, they said that his dad had, turned him in, but we need interviews from these people. I need to believe this story. And they're not doing anything for a guy like me to believe it. So I'm going to continue to question the death of Charlie Kirk. And it all goes back to when Donald Trump was shot in the head, and Trump didn't really demand any investigations. We have to prevent this from happening again, okay? That's the goal here. Prevent it from happening again. And Trump getting shot in the head in July of 2024, Charlie Kirk being assassinated on camera in, September of 2025, 14 months apart. I mean, it's got to be orchestrated by the same people. They did it with JFK. And there is in documents, and the JFK documents do say that Israel had influence over JFK's assassination. It's obvious that Israel has influence over our politics. Some, like me, even call it an occupied nation. Trump took $232 million from Israel. Gets me so pissed. $232 million, ladies and gentlemen. That's a lot of money. And you can look up AIPAC. Donations are public for everybody. Okay? Now, like I said, I'm trying to keep these podcasts into like the 35, 40-minute range, so I don't want to keep going. I could always revisit that at a different episode. So now I want to go into this with Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica. Charlie Kirk's, this whole ceremony they had in Arizona with Charlie Kirk, that was just basically a GOP rally. I mean, this woman comes out to fireworks. That's not really a setting to throw a party, which is what I call it. It was a GOP party. And the people that attended this rally are completely innocent. They feel bad for Charlie Kirk. Let's go to this big event. Let's show support. That's not on them. The GOP is opportunistic, just like a lot of people are in the government. And they decided to throw a GOP rally. And the whole fireworks thing, and then Trump came out, and then Trump's like, bring out Erica after she spoke. Why was Erica Kirk the second to last person to speak, and Trump was the last one? You know, we need to demand answers into what happened. We're not getting answers. And it's our job as Americans, as citizens, as podcasters, as journalists, whatever, to demand answers that don't make sense. And none of it makes sense. It's the reality of it. So overall, I question the death of Charlie Kirk. I don't believe the story at face value. This whole Erica Kirk thing is very weird. And she's on her show, and listen, she's like smiling and laughing, and people are taking screenshots of that. You know, these are just clips at the end of the day. You know, I don't really take the smiling like serious, or like, wow, she really doesn't care. You gotta slow down, you know. Now, was she a pageant for Donald Trump? You know, was she a beauty pageant? Yeah, that's true for Donald Trump. So like all that's coordinated. Was it a arranged marriage? Who knows? But we're allowed to ask these questions. But if you don't, you're racist and anti-Semitic and all this other nonsense they want to tell you. You have to break through the mental barricade of being called a racist or an anti-Semite. Who cares? The reason I say who cares, because the definitions that they try and imply it to you, they don't make any sense. You know if you're racist or if you're anti-Semitic. It's all BS. Okay? It's all BS. And just break out of the mental barricade, break out of being a mental slave. And you have to be able to have these tough conversations with people. You have to be willing to go forward and to say these things and face backlash. It could be from your family, it could be from your kids, it could be from your cousins, it could be from anybody. But the truth always prevails, because that's what the Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth wants us to do. This is not about Republican and Democrat. This is purely, everybody's like, oh, it's good versus evil. No, it is God versus Satan on planet Earth. Now, God, the Almighty Creator, He is in charge. And He has allowed Satan to come into this world because we have free will, ladies and gentlemen. Good has free will. Bad has free will. We have free will to do what we want, no matter who you are. So that's that. And my last topic here is going to be overall about Trump. I'm going to try and keep this under a couple minutes here with Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, I voted for him 3 times. This is a failed presidency across the board. We're not ending war. Nobody's been held accountable. Israel does have foreign influence, really influence over our politics. I mean, we just had rumors going around that Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that I own Trump, I own the USA. It's a very dangerous position to be in. And that's been like the topic of discussion the last couple months. How much influence Israel has. And it all started when they attacked Gaza after they said they wouldn't. And everybody was paying close attention. So it's kind of interesting. The public has lost support for Israel, except for probably boomers, and a couple of other Gen Xers, maybe some millennials. But you think Gen Z is pro-Israel? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think this is good for us. that we're having these discussions and having conversations. It's not good for the enemy, but it's good for people like us. And obviously Donald Trump has time to, rearrange this presidency he's in, but there's been no accountability. James Comey was indicted, though. James Comey was indicted for lying to Congress. Okay? You really think anybody cares about that? We need a drastic change in this country. Something drastic. Something that it takes down the whole establishment. And I'm not saying it's by violence. I'm actually saying the exact opposite of it, where we do have to remain peaceful. But I just don't I don't think that Trump's going to have an answer for this. I do think it's over his head. I do think he's exhausted. I do think he's literally sick from it. I mean, he's bruised up in his arms and his legs, and he doesn't eat well. He doesn't drink. I mean, he doesn't drink, but he doesn't drink anything healthy. He drinks Diet Cokes all day. It's like one of those things where everyone's got a weight problem, but you control what you consume. And I think it's catching up to Trump on top of the stress that he's dealing with. And he's acknowledged that I don't even think he likes Bibi Netanyahu, but he's still doing pro-Israel policies. Everything's pro-Israel. We're going to back Gaza. He said that today on September 30th. We're not going to back Gaza. We're going to back Israel going into Gaza. I mean, this is just right into the same vortex over and over again. There's no changes right now. The economy is terrible. Everything is expensive. People are making more money than boomer parents have, and they're still struggling by a lot. They can't buy a house. The World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, the former founder of it, or the former president of it, whatever, he's on record saying, you will own nothing and like it. You will own nothing and like it. Are you not experiencing that today? Between your car payments and your rent and the income that you make? You're making more than, some of you are making more than your parents have. And they got to have a house and 3 kids and a housewife. And you're looking at, how do I pay my bills and how do I eat? And you get the average boomer that'll tell you, yeah, why don't you just work harder? Yeah, we don't live in the same world. I'm sorry that you bought your house for $100,000 and sold it for $800. Yeah, it must be nice. And they just can't grasp that. But overall, Trump's not doing well, in my opinion. His approval rating is, 33% or something like that. He used to be at 55. So all the people that were Democrat that voted right are now not voting right or not supporting him. And even some people like me voted him for 3 times, protested, lost my job. I don't regret it. But even I don't even it's not that I don't support him. I want what's best for our president, but it's very hard for me to put on a MAGA hat and be like, yeah, he's awesome. Some people think that, I don't. And until there's some real change in this country, we are still going to experience some hardships. And if there's nothing done about this Charlie Kirk assassination, how we get more answers, it might just happen to somebody again. So anyway, I'm going to do this every single episode. Every single night I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to post it on YouTube only. I'll create some shorts. I'll create some clips from these podcast shows. And I plan to make this a full-time gig. I had 40,000 followers at the time. I went back to YouTube because they just changed some policies. And my goal here is to get to 1,000 subscribers. Then I can go live every night. And then I will upgrade to a 2-bedroom. And then I'll make my entire 2-bedroom a whole podcast set. And I'll buy a whole bunch of stuff. But I got to get to 1,000 subscribers first. So if you're viewing this and you're not a subscriber, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to Unfiltered Conservative 1 on my YouTube channel. Once I get to 1,000, let's get to a buffer like 1,050. I then have the capability to go live, and that's what I would want to do every single night, Monday through Friday. So this is my first podcast episode. Thank you for those that are still here listening. And starting tomorrow, we're going to go with current events and anything in life that happens. I'll have a bunch of articles in front of me, and I'll make sure that everything's touched up on, and I believe that you will be very entertained and you're going to learn a lot from me. And thank you very much.